Right. Like shocking.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here. It is a little after 3, so as you know, this is a 30-minute dialogue conversation between Kevin Beggs and Peter Liguori. But I wanted to be here to intro this one because I wanted to say that we really appreciate Peter flying in and sharing his wisdom with us. And as you know, Kevin was our past chairman of our board and is now on our board and is the president of Lionsgate, so has a lot of experience, obviously, in producing and directing and everything else, and he obviously is a good friend of Peter Liguori's. So we're hoping that Kevin still asks Peter some difficult questions, which make him squirm at least a little bit. As you know, Lionsgate is a big player in the TV world, and Kevin is here today to kind of elicit some responses from Peter that perhaps you haven't heard before. And Peter, we really appreciate you coming down and seeing us. As you know, Peter has recently been with Discovery and OWN, and hopefully has a lot to say about those experiences. So we appreciate both of you being here. We appreciate you guys coming. And Kevin, take it away. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks for having us. Appreciate it. We actually have a whole bunch prepared, but I'm going to just jump in to the biographical part first, which is always interesting to me about how people got started and why. So how did you wind up in television in the first place?
Well, my mother wasn't happy about it, I'll say that. She wanted a lawyer, but you know, my start really was, I started in advertising in packaged goods, working with Procter & Gamble and Unilever. And everything I do, even to this day, basically goes through that filter of being a marketer. What is the viewer? What does the consumer want? How do you sell it to them? Can this project be wrapped in a package that would be attractive to a viewer? I spent about 3 years at Saatchi & Saatchi, working with Procter & Gamble. Then 2 years at Ogilvy and Mather, working with Unilever. And that's when my first big break happened to get into the business. My client at Unilever was none other than Eric Kessler, who is now the co-president of HBO. Eric and I would always have Friday meetings. Those Friday meetings would be, we would go to a movie and sneak in our brown bag lunch. Eric went to HBO to start a home video division, asked me to join him. What was also funny about that incident was I had an interview not just with Eric and his new associates, but with HBO as well. They'd asked me, you know, everyone wants to be in the television business. What credentials do you have other than your marketing? And I said I have 2. One is I'm married to an actress, so I clearly know the ups and downs of the business. And 2, believe it or not, I had written a script. And as you can tell, it wasn't a good script because I'm here talking as an executive, but it was at least was a 3-act, well-structured script, and it went around HBO and got me in, and that was really my entree into the business.
That's great. So HBO and then FX. How did FX come about? And
yeah, well, I was at HBO for pretty much 8 years, almost 9 years, and started in their home video division, which was an outstanding job. And we were the home of the independents. We would have worked closely with Lionsgate, doing output deals. We would buy both the home video rights and pay cable rights to films. And it was the Wild West for us. It was the nascent stages of the home video business. We almost acted as the bankers to the many defunct independents, the Reichers, the Cinecoms, the Savoys. But our primary independent was Miramax. And so I really got a chance to learn the nitty-gritty of the movie business from Mr. Nit and Mr. Gritty, Bob and Harvey, and it was a great experience. Those guys really did understand how to dig out and feather out the underexposed and how to market those films, and really enjoyed that. And then I went over to be the head of consumer marketing at HBO itself, which was also a great experience. At that point, I wanted to get into programming. Because I had certain facility in talking to writers and producers and the programmers, they gave me that job, but I was really not completely satisfied with just being a marketer for the rest of my career. So I did a deal with Michael Fuchs at the time, where he said, if you want to produce something, you should go ahead and produce it. Maybe we'll buy it. And that should be used as your entree into programming, because I don't want to just take a marketer and put him in the programming group. So I was working with Stanley Tucci on a project which became Big Night, starring Tony Shalhoub and Isabel Rossellini. And it was a labor of love, and the themes of that movie still continue to this day in both my career and Stanley's career, which is art versus commerce, and everyone else's career in this room. The aspirations for creative courage versus the realities of you have to put food on your table. I really got the bug producing that film. So wanted to move to LA, realized that Los Angeles was my greatest opportunity to actually get near content, produce content, but it wasn't going to be a straight line. There were two opportunities. One was potentially my being the head of marketing for Disneyland, which would have been a weird kind of entree into working within a studio. And the other, in some ways, equally odd entree was starting the Fox Sports regional sports networks, all 23 strong at the time. I decided to take that job. I love sports. It was really three people who started it. It was like Arthur Smith, Jeff Shell, and myself. And we just stayed in one office, and everyone did everything. And that was a lot of fun for first 18 months. I then moved on to be the head of marketing for all of Fox Cable. And at one point, Peter Chernin asked me to take a look at FX. And what was going on, how did I feel about it? And I told him, FX at that point was in 28 million homes. Ann Sweeney had been running it. It was a bunch of daytime programming under the umbrella guise of TV Made Fresh Daily. It was a bunch of shows produced out of a studio on 24th Street, all very credible daytime pieces of programming. Some of the shows were really good. But then you went into prime time and they just leveraged the Fox library and the Green Hornet, the Batman, and the whole business model fell apart. So on a Friday, I gave Peter my point of view, and I got a phone call on a Saturday morning. I was on vacation. It's Peter Chernin, okay? Gets on the phone, he says, I have good news and bad news. He said, what do you want first? I said, I'm on vacation, I'll take the good news. He said, you're gonna be president of a network. I said, great, what's the bad news? He says it's gonna be FX, it is in Nowheresville, it's terrible, and I'm probably gonna have to fire you. And I don't think that kind of quote or impetus appears in any management textbook. But for me, it was incredibly freeing, because basically what Peter was saying is, you can't fall off the floor, so go for it. And we did. And it was, I will say, my 7+ years at FX were by far the most rewarding and exhilarating in my career in this business.
That's great. So fast forward from going there to The Shield, which for me, and I think for a lot of people, was the defining series that put FX on the map in the original space and opened the door for all the other successes that have followed. Well, what did it take to get that made, and what was the impetus?
A lot of naivete, and a lot of luck. I would love to be able to say that we knew The Shield was going to be a hit, but it was a project that I would say was blessed from the get-go. First, Sean Ryan, who wrote The Shield, had been commissioned by Fox Television Studios to write a half-hour comedy. I think they paid him 35 grand to write a half-hour comedy. After a year, he had nothing. He said he wanted to write something that was more of a writing sample. So he wrote The Shield. And The Shield came in amongst 10 other scripts, and I was working with Kevin Riley at the time. Kevin was at Brillstein Gray. I convinced him to come over to FX, which was the most frightening thing he had ever done in his career, but he knew I wanted to create, for lack of a better term, free HBO. This whole notion that the broadcast networks and TNT and TBS were all here, HBO was here, and there was this middle ground that wasn't servicing a more intelligent, adult, authentic audience. And with The Shield, one of the things we also said we didn't want to do was we didn't want to put on a genre show as our first show. No cop show, no medical show, no legal show. We had to announce to the community, and we defined the community as advertisers, affiliates, our audience, and the creative community, that we wanted to do things differently, that we were going to be creatively ambitious, and we were going to show courage. And Kevin comes walking into my office and he said, I know you don't want to do a cop show, but this is a different kind of cop show. I think you should take a look at the script. And every page was more electric than the page before it. So we call up Sean Ryan and we said, we're going to order your pilot. And Sean Ryan's response was, who is this? Because he didn't think it was me and Kevin. He genuinely did not think it was me and Kevin. And we told him it was us and that we were going to make the pilot. And every last aspect of that, again, was blessed. We couldn't find Vic Mackey and Michael Chiklis, who had just come off the commish, kept trying to get into audition, and we kept saying no. And finally, Michael called me directly and said, Peter, I really want to do this. I do not look like I used to look. I don't act like I used to act. I do not have to audition. I'm a television star and I want to do it. And so I finally agreed to have Michael come in, and I walked past him. I'll never forget it. I walked past him in the casting. I said, where's Michael? And I go, that was him. All ripped and a black t-shirt, and he came in and auditioned, and there was no air left in the room. He was absolutely frightening and riveting and compelling. And we just looked around, and someone asked, they looked at me. I said, he didn't win the role. He is the role. And from there, everything just went really well. And the nice thing about, and again, it's something that Kevin and his company did with AMC, with Mad Men, and you should always be commended for that. You're doing a terrific job, and television is all the better for you and Lionsgate being in it. But, and please applaud. I mean, seriously, it is a big service that Kevin continues to have the courage to go out there and do projects that aren't right down the middle of the plate and center cut. But you get one, it opens the door for another. Right. And in fact, the second one in many ways is harder because you're defined, you've set the bar, and we did Nip Tuck. And Nip Tuck was, again, one of those projects that had two reactions. People would say, we should have done a show about plastic surgeons. It was like right there. We all know that there's a million great concepts. It's the execution. And Ryan Murphy just, with incredible excellence, wound up writing and producing and directing that show. And that was the one that I think really, that 1-2 punch put FX on the map. We went from 28 million homes to, by the time I left, we were in 70. Wow. Our ratings went from being basically a 0.2 network to almost a 1. And the community really did a great job of embracing us, because it's not just smart execs. It is the community rallying around a notion and knowing good work can be done. And I'm very proud of what we did there, and I think it helped the AMCs of this world and the TNTs and the USAs and everyone here, because that really does show content is king.
In Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell talks about the 10,000 hours to master something. You've probably worked those 10,000 hours, but
yes.
When did you feel, HBO, FX, Fox, Discovery, you've worked at some of the biggest companies in the business. When did you feel like, I got it? I actually know what I'm doing every day.
I don't think I have that yet. I've definitely put in the 10,000 hours, but I feel that you spend most of that 10,000 hours failing in our business, and it's a very difficult thing to communicate. I have taught at business school and schools for theater, television, and film. And I start out when I teach a TV class, and I say, my goal is to basically have 3% of you want to continue in this business. And everyone looks at me like I'm nuts. I should be the biggest advocate for getting you into television. And my point being that this is a business of failure. You have to really love being in this business in order to deal with some monumental failures. I mean, there were shows that I loved at Fox, a show called New Amsterdam, that, you know, I loved this script, and I loved the actor, and got Lasse Hallström to direct it, and it looked great, and David Manson came on, and it's alchemy. You then look at it and realize it's not what we thought it was. And this business consistently humbles you, and if you could stand 10, 20, 30,000 hours of failure, you may get those 1,000 hours that are just brilliant and totally exhilarating, and that's the addiction for someone like me.
That's great. Thank you for that. The other people talk about the golden age of television, the second golden age of television that we might be living in. Was there a first golden age, or is this just kind of like Happy Days, and now we have Mad Men and we realize it wasn't all what it was cracked up to be? And B, if so, are we in a second one?
Yeah, I clearly think there was a first golden age of television, and I'm happy to be part of what I think is the second golden age. You know, the first golden age of television is, we almost have to take this huge step back. It was a brand new form of storytelling. We had movies, we had theater, we had some radio shows, and the ability to write the I Love Lucys and the Honeymooners, the Ben Caseys, the Riflemans of this world, in such an unusual format, was truly a golden age. And though I don't think TV could have been considered just a trend, not a trend, but just like a quick phenomenon, those were great shows.
Right.
And that definitely was a golden age, which set the pace. And there may have been a golden age with the Norman Lear years as well, but do I think now we're in one? Absolutely, because storytelling needs to evolve. And I always use the example of on its most elemental form, an audience expects something new out of television, out of all their arts, out of all their storytellers. And Charlie Chaplin was the first guy that really noticed this. He knew that if he put up on the silent screen him slipping on a banana peel, the audience would laugh. Did that the first time, uproarious laughter. Did it the second time, and the audience didn't laugh as much. And he realized that the audience was getting educated and getting sophisticated, and the joke was not as fresh and new or surprising. Third time he filmed him on a banana peel, his foot walked over the banana peel, and he walked into an open manhole cover. And the audience laughed. And what I think that represents is audiences' appetites do get more sophisticated. And we're answering the call right now. We're answering the call by acknowledging and addressing the fact that an audience is more sophisticated today than it was, let's say, 10, 15 years ago. We're able to put in a Mad Men on and have them appreciate Matt's exploration of sexual mores, frankly, today by going through the optics of what sexual mores were like in the 60s. And we're able to put aggressive programming on like The Shield. We're able to explore something as surreal as Glee. And I think, you know, frequently when I talk to students about writing, I actually say, you know what, I think movies kind of easy, kind of a layup, 3 acts, you got 120 pages, have at it. But if you find a character that you want to write to for 100 episodes, you've got real gold. And that's outstanding writing. And you see how House has developed, et cetera.
Right.
You just sit back and go, that's where wonderful writing's occurring right now.
Got it. Let's talk about streaming video. Netflix kind of changed the media landscape. It's turned the CW into a profitable enterprise after many years of struggle. It's been a big thing for us with Mad Men. Epix, it's kind of helped it launch into profitability. What's the long term? Other competitors?
You know, first I think there will be lots of competition. I do think Amazon will be a player. Obviously Hulu, you read Variety today, 4 or so series. The question I think all of us are gonna be answering is, you know, Netflix's margins, pretty slender. And is this almost kind of a tech play that don't worry about the margins. It's a long-term player and here to stay. I think these businesses are going to have to run as businesses. They're not going to be able to run like they did in the tech bubble era. So Reed's challenge, especially with those thin margins, is now how to productively buy content. Amazon may have deeper pockets. Microsoft down the road, if they were to develop original programs, they may have different deeper pockets. Hulu, I don't think will have very, very deep pockets. So everyone's going to have to be, I think, incredibly smart about that investment. Right now, it's wonderful manna from heaven, all newfound dollars.
Right.
But at the end of the day, quality is going to conquer, not just quantity, and those bets are going to have to be, I think, a little more informed.
Got it. You've been at places that do a lot of scripted. In the case of Fox, scripted and non-scripted. Discovery was more non-scripted. The way the cable landscape lays out, not many are doing both. Broadcast, yes, but in cable, true falls into reality, not doing scripted. TNT and USA have recently announced that they're going to get into nonfiction. FX did it for a while and then kind of got out of it because the scripted was really hitting. Is there can this marriage be saved? Can they coexist, or do they just need to kind of niche out?
No, I think they can coexist. I am not a huge believer in rationally branding and programming networks. And what I mean by that is on a rational basis. Frequently, networks and shows are defined by demographics. We're going to women 25 to 54, blah, 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 blah. I think that the truly successful ones are going to go that next step deeper and explore psychographically or emotionally, what does that audience want? And then you could program around that. If you have an audience whose emotional thirst is, by way of example, a Discovery with men wanting to be men. You see a lot of those shows. Well, then you can develop toward that. You can sit there and say, would a Sons of Anarchy work on a Discovery? Quite possibly yes, if you just look at it on that emotional level. When you look at it at a true, is there some semi-scripted show, i.e. the Hills type of show, and or scripted show, which feeds that audience's emotional need to go into dark places and then see resolution? I think the answer is yes. I think it's wrong if you just say, I have females, I'm going to do a female scripted show. You better feed an emotional need there, and then you can be successful.
Got it. Comedy has made a big comeback. Modern Family kind of leading the way on the broadcast side. A whole bunch of comedy on FX and Fox and all over. What do you think informs that? Does it have anything to do with the larger economic kind of anxiety?
Everyone talks about the larger economic environment, but the reality is we didn't get any comedies the first year of it, or our last economic downturn. Comedies actually didn't come in and fill the void. I truly don't think it's a matter of people's state of mind. I think it's a matter of unscripted filled that comedy void for a long time. If you wanted unpredictability and kids and people say the darndest thing and truth is stranger than fiction, kind of unscripted just immediately filled that void. Well, now, where's unscripted going? It's harder and harder to find an unpredictable laugh that doesn't have some relationship with a cousin show or brother and sister show. So now I feel like we're almost substituting possible laughs for comedic guaranteed laughs. A writer's room knows when something's going to be funny. The question is whether the audience is going to buy that. So I feel that comedy is filling a specific void. And when you talk about environment, I actually look at a show, Walking Dead, and say, because people ask me a lot why I think zombies are working right now. And Joe Q. Public faces zombies every day. Joe Q. Public wakes up, wonders if he has a job, does he have health insurance, how much is gas, what's going on, and each day he faces fear and overcomes it, only to wake up the next day and face more. And one of the aspects of brilliant storytelling, brilliant storytellers, is they actually force the audience to exercise their social expertise. So I watch Walking Dead, and I've actually figured out how to go through a very scary but victorious day, and I'm all the better for it. So I feel like that's a show that actually feeds as opposed to a comedy that just simply makes me forget.
Got it. Again, all the places you've ever worked have pretty big international profiles. We're here at NATPE is a huge international climate. How much is it that big business factor? We talked about the balance between art and commerce in Big Night. How much, as a buyer, sitting in the chair when something's walking in, do you think about those ancillaries, starting with the international and your studio partners, and how can they monetize it? Or do you at all, or does that become something down the line after you've figured out the creative?
Yeah, well, first, as a buyer, I'm going to be honest, couldn't care less.
Right.
Kevin, you want to sell me a show and lose money on it, and I can make money?
Right.
Love you like a brother, but thank you for the show.
Got it.
As a television person, and being a big proponent of having, because it's really odd, a lot of television companies or a lot of these studios, their network budget is almost separated from the studio budget. I've never thought that was a proper way of looking at the business. But if in fact you're working hand in hand with your studio, it's enormously important. Because you can sit there and say, from a global perspective, let's go tackle this show. And it's becoming increasingly important. It was very frightening 2 years ago, seeing the plunge in international sales figures. It's frightening to see the amount of local production being done. But again, great content is critical. And so now we do have an eye, and should have an eye as a buyer, for what the long-term health of the show is, because if in fact you can do those foreign sales, you will wind up with the Fringes of this world staying on a bit longer because of its foreign capabilities. And television is all the better for it, because what's going to fill that void? Probably something second tier.
Right. Many of us here today are producers, sellers, distributors, aspiring producers. As a buyer, you've sat through many, many pitches. Give us one great tip, if you could say, good pitching always has X, or these are the best.
Good pitching always has something incredibly personal at its core. And you could almost see it in a writer's eye when they are pitching from an incredibly vulnerable, personal place. I would say the best pitch to have been in a room in was Ryan Murphy pitching Nip Tuck. Ryan had just come off of Popular, which was not a very successful show. I think he was incredibly raw from the experience. And he came in and discussed really why he wanted to do Nip Tuck. And Nip Tuck's advent was, Ryan was a reporter here in Miami, the Miami Herald. He was doing a story about men getting plastic surgery. Went in to see a plastic surgeon. They had a great conversation. Ryan is someone who's got his own levels of vanity, sometimes in control, sometimes a little less so. And he asked the plastic surgeon, "What would you do to me?" And the plastic surgeon took out a magic marker and completely redid Ryan's body from head to toe.
Oh my God.
And it was crushing.
Right.
It was really crushing to Ryan. And you knew when he was going to write that show, he was going to dig into the psychology of those patients and those doctors. He was going to mine real drama so that pressures put on those characters so that they would reveal their true selves. And this was a phenomena that was going on that created a specific anxiety that all of us felt. Why can't I be better? I can be better looking. And what did that mean for those characters? And that personal touch, he did the same thing with Glee. you felt the young teenage Ryan Murphy with the L on his forehead walking through high school in Indiana, and you knew he was going to write something incredibly authentic.
Great. To wrap it up, what next for you? Plans?
You know,
Where do you want to be?
It's been 2 weeks. Who the heck knows?
Right, right.
You know, look, clearly I'm not one of these guys who wants to use the turn of phrase, I'm going to get sand between my toes, and I really don't want to go ziplining in Costa Rica or improve my surfing in Australia. Look, I think this is an incredibly vital business, and it is as exciting as it's ever been. I want to take my time. I want to explore the possibilities and the ranges of everything from big media company, frankly, to teaching. Something that I really, really, really enjoyed, and all places in between. I've given myself the luxury of not making a definitive decision, and all I have to say is, no matter what goes on, as long as I am somehow feeding content into these companies and into these networks, I think I'll be a happy man, and I think there's many different ways of touching that. I don't care if it's an 18-year-old aspiring writer or a 48 four-time Emmy winner. As long as I'm somewhere near that great content, I think I'll be fulfilled.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank
Peter
you.
Liguori, everyone.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, well done.
Thank you.